Hello and welcome back to Language Fluency. Today we'll explore how to interpret bar charts effectively and describe them clearly, which is a key skill for writing Task 1 in academic writing. Let's get started. Let's analyze what examiners expect when they assess your response. According to the band descriptors, to achieve a band 7 in task achievement, your answer needs to do two main things. First, present a clear overview of the main trends, differences, or stages. Second, highlight and explain the key features. But how exactly can we do this? Let's break it down into three guiding questions. The first question is, should we focus on trends, differences, or stages? The answer depends on what the chart is showing. For example, if the chart shows changes over time, then trends are important. If it compares categories, then differences become more important. The second question is, how do we find and discuss these things? Here, you need to look for what stands out, the highest numbers, the lowest numbers, the biggest increases or decreases, or any unusual patterns. These are the points that the examiner expects you to notice and mention. And finally, the third question, how do we choose which features are most important? You don't need to describe everything on the chart. Instead, focus only on the most significant features. For example, don't spend time describing every small difference. Highlight the big trends and contrasts, because these are what make your writing strong and focused. So, keep these three questions in mind every time you describe a bar chart. Let's take a closer look at the key trends in this bar chart, which shows air conditioning unit sales in Mexico and Australia from April to October 2015. First, we can see that Mexico's figures slope upwards, indicating a clear upward trend from April through July. In contrast, Australia's air conditioning sales followed a completely different pattern, almost the opposite of Mexico's. In summary, the two countries show a marked shift in trends. Mexico's sales climbed and then plummeted, whereas Australia's dropped initially before rising dramatically in the final months. When analyzing data, it is not necessary to describe every single figure, as doing so can make the explanation lengthy. Instead, the focus should be on highlighting the most significant features, such as the starting and ending points, the highest peak, or notable comparisons between key data points. This approach ensures the analysis remains clear, concise, and impactful. Take a look at this bar chart on the right. Notice that not every single number is meaningful. For example, in June, Mexico's sales were about 3,000 units, but that number doesn't stand out as a peak or a low point. Similarly, in September, Australia's figure is neither the highest nor the lowest, it's just somewhere in between. So, mentioning those values in detail might not add much value to our analysis. Focus on the patterns, the turning points, and the contrasts. Let's look at our first example. The bar chart illustrates the number of air conditioning units purchased in Mexico and Australia between April and October 2015, measured in thousands. Overall, both countries showed fluctuating trends over the period, with Mexico experiencing a peak in July and Australia reaching its highest sales in October. In April, Australia had significantly higher sales than Mexico, with approximately 2.5 thousand units sold compared to around 0.5 thousand in Mexico. July marked the peak for Mexico, with sales reaching nearly 4.2 thousand units, the highest figure across the entire period. In contrast, Australia's purchases declined further to about 1.4 thousand during this month. By October, there was a dramatic shift. While Mexico's sales plummeted to only 0.3 thousand units, Australia experienced a significant surge, reaching almost 4.7 thousand units, the highest monthly total shown on the graph. In summary, Mexico's air conditioning unit purchases peaked in July, followed by a steep decline, whereas Australia's demand remained relatively stable until a sharp increase in October, indicating possible seasonal differences in climate and consumer behavior between the two countries. Now, let's look at a second example. The bar chart compares the number of students enrolled in vocational and academic programs over a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020. Overall, while academic program enrollments remained relatively stable, there was a steady increase in the number of students choosing vocational education. In 2010, approximately 45,000 students were enrolled in academic programs, compared to 60,000 in vocational programs. Over the next 2 years, both categories saw modest growth. From 2016 onward, a clear divergence emerged. While academic enrollments began a consistent upward trend, vocational program numbers started to decline. Academic enrollments increased steadily, reaching 70,000 in 2018, and peaking at 75,000 in 2020. In contrast, vocational enrollments began to decline after 2014, falling to 62,000 in 2016, and dropping further to 55,000 by 2020, its lowest point in the decade. In conclusion, the data reveals a growing preference for academic programs, particularly in the latter half of the period, while interest in vocational training declined gradually. This shift may reflect changing labor market demands or evolving educational priorities among students. Let's start by reviewing some essential vocabulary that will help you describe bar charts with precision and confidence. First, divergence refers to a point where two trends move in different directions, one might be rising while the other is falling. Next, plateaued means the data has remained stable after a period of increase or decrease. A marked shift indicates a significant or noticeable change in trend. This could be a sudden rise or fall that stands out from the rest of the data. When we say something peaked or reached a peak, we're referring to the highest point of the data, the maximum value observed during the time period. The phrases, in contrast, or whereas, are powerful tools for comparison. They help highlight differences between two sets of data, making your analysis clearer and more effective. And finally, plummet describes a fast, steep, and often dramatic fall, so if a line drops sharply, that's a plummet. These terms aren't just fancy words, they'll help you sound more fluent and accurate when describing bar charts. Now that we've covered the vocabulary, let's go over the key takeaways to keep in mind when analyzing and describing graphs. First, always identify trends, not just numbers. It's not enough to state what the values are, explain how they're changing over time. Second, compare clearly using connectors like while, whereas, or in contrast. These words make your comparison stronger and more logical. Third, use precise vocabulary, don't settle for basic language. Words like plummet, divergence, and plateaued show depth of understanding. Fourth, always summarize the main features of the graph. Focus on the most important patterns, the highs, lows, and turning points. And lastly, write a clear, insightful conclusion. This isn't just a summary, it's your chance to interpret the data and explain what it means. Thank you so much for watching. That's all for today, see you in the next video. Until then, keep practicing, and good luck. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more tips, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one.